Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the City Chatter Podcast. I'm John Bernstrom, Public Information Officer for the City of Grand Forks. And this week of Halloween, we thought we'd change things up. As opposed to having city council members on talking about policy and what was voted on yesterday at a committee of the whole meeting, we thought we'd talk about Halloween safety, and what better way to do that than bring in a couple of Grand Forks finest. We have Corporal Abby Brown and Corporal... Is it Corporal?
Corporal, yeah.
Corporal Mike Ruitt,
Yeah.
from the Grand Forks Police Department, joining us here on the City Chatter Podcast. So I'm going to start first with Abby. Abby, just real quick, just talk about your history, how long you've been with the force, and how long have you been a police officer?
So I've been a police officer with Grand Forks for about 9 years now. A native of Washington State, came here in 2009 on a softball scholarship to UND and ended up staying.
There you go. So I got to, okay, so you got to dive right into that softball. How about that new softball diamond at UND?
It's gorgeous. We went to the opening day, actually, and that was such a fun game. A very cool stadium. Very jealous about that.
I know. I saw an aerial photo from that opening day, and I looked at it, and fall colors in the leaves, and the field was lit up, and you could see the football field. And when I first looked at that, I'm a UND grad from 2001, and I looked at that photo, and I go, I wonder what school that is.
Yeah,
it's
grown
the
up
UND.
a lot.
It has grown up a lot. Also joining us, Corporal Ruitt from the Grand Forks Police Department. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your history?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised here in town. I've been with the police department since July of 2014. So I initially got hired as a community service officer. They do kind of a lot of parking and animal calls and that type of thing. And then I switched over to be a sworn police officer a year later, July of 2015. So yeah, since that time, I've worked on patrol, and I'm actually one of the 3 canine handlers for the department too. So.
And we're going to get to that in a minute, but I have a question. You talk about you went from a CSO, CSO,
Yeah.
To a sworn officer. Did you go through an academy? Did you go through some training? Was it what caused that jump?
Yeah, so being a police officer was kind of always part of the plan for me. And there were no openings to be a police officer when I initially kind of was at the point in life where I was ready to start that type of career. So I applied, I got hired as a community service officer, and then from that position, I went through the same hiring process that everybody else did. So then I got finished on the roster. I got selected to become a police officer, and then the department sent me to a police academy.
After being hired?
After being hired,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then, Abby, with you, same thing. You came here for college to play softball. At what point was law enforcement part of the long-term plan?
So I studied forensic science, was my bachelor's degree at the University of North Dakota. I had no intention of being a police officer. Actually, I wanted to go back to Washington State, work for the Washington State Patrol in a crime lab. Life took a different turn. I ended up staying here, and I really wanted to use my degree. And I was like, well, what can I do here to use my degree? And policing was it. And 9 years later, I'm still here.
So just so you know, not a similar plan as far as career paths, but I came to UND, and I was going to live in Grand Forks for 4 years. That was 27 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm on my second house, first marriage, 2 kids, all that fun stuff. It's amazing how I'm just like, well, I got a job. Well, I'll stay for a little bit, and here we are.
Yeah, I agree.
That's right. Okay, so Halloween. I'm gonna start with you, Mike. So with Halloween in Grand Forks as a police officer, is that a busy night as an officer? Is it a quiet night? I'm assuming not quiet because of the amount of foot traffic, but is it one of those as law enforcement you're like, oh, here we go?
Yeah, so Halloween always just kind of depends on the year. I've worked a number of different Halloweens, and I've worked during the day, I've worked during the night, and it kind of just depends on the year. I know Halloween is a day that we all try to be out and we try to be visible because there's a lot of kids and a lot of families out walking around. But as far as calls for service and the different things that we deal with, it really has been just year to year.
I think it also depends on the day of the week, too, whether it's a weekend or a weekday.
Sure. And along those lines, weather this year's looking pretty good. There's no snow on the ground. So is it fair to assume as law enforcement, Abby, I'm looking at you, that you're going to expect a lot of little kids out there?
Yes.
What are some tips you give to families as they head out sending their kids out to crossing a lot of streets, stuff like that. As law enforcement, what are some tips you give to families?
Yeah, so a few of the things are we would like if you accompany your young children trick or treating. If they're a little bit older and they're not going to be with adults, go in large groups, stick to familiar areas to those kids. Utilize crosswalks and traffic signals. Of course, not all vehicles are going to stop for you or see you. So try to make yourself as visible as possible as far as, a light source or reflective costumes or things like that. Don't enter the residence of a stranger. That's something that we are really big on as well. Dress for the weather. It's supposed to be decent weather, but still a little bit cold. And if you're an adult, look through your kids' candy before they eat that, just to make sure it hasn't been opened or tampered with or anything like that.
I will say this. My kids are 15 and almost 13, and they still trick or treat. In fact, it's more fun now as teenagers, and they're good. My kids are good kids. They're not causing problems or anything like that. But they go through their own candy because they want to trade.
So my sister and I used to do that as kids. We would sit down and we would group them into the different candies, and then we'd barter each other. I'll give you 3 of these for 2 of those. And
Right. This is a full-size candy bar, and that is worth 3 Laffy Taffies. Yes.
get it.
And my son with braces, all right, now he's sitting there and he get a Laffy Taffy. He's like, I can't eat this, so I can't do anything with it. But is there a certain type of call that you get more on Halloween than not, or you talk about as calls to service does it change? Is there an increased volume of calls? Do you think of, hey, I'm thinking from residents of, all right, my door's closed and they're still knocking.
Yeah, so we've obviously, I would say that the most popular call for service that we get on Halloween is what we call at the police department just suspicious activity. So people will call in because of the holiday, everybody's in costumes, wearing masks, and it can be fun to mess with people, to try and scare people, and people who aren't prepared for that, sometimes they'll see somebody running through their backyard or something like that, and they'll call it into us. That's typically just we drive through the area, and if we find somebody that matches the description, we'll roll our window down and say, hey guys, just make sure you're staying out of people's yards, and it's usually a very cordial encounter. But
it doesn't help you when you say somebody in a costume ran through my yard.
Yeah.
That doesn't go. That doesn't help, right? Yeah. Right. So I will say this. As kids, you said law enforcement was always there for you. How many times Halloween were you a police officer?
So I don't remember. I actually used to, when I used to trick or treat when I was younger, my mom would actually hand make some of my costumes.
Yeah, right here. Yep.
And I had some pretty wild ones. And some ones I think that she still has.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. My son has asked to wear some of my old costumes and stuff from time to time. But
that's pretty good. My favorite costume growing up was, it was supposed to be Darth Vader, right? Supposed to be. And it was Darth Vader, but again, winter, right? Dressed for this, was trying to be warm. And it was like an old motorcycle helmet, and that's what we turned into it's a big helmet. So it turned more into like the Spaceballs thing, which as a kid, I wanted to be Darth Vader, didn't quite match it. So it was a good costume. I look back and I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. Not the intention. Not the intention. So Abby, for you, law enforcement wasn't there. Was Halloween big for you? Was it you talked about trading candy with your sister?
Yes. We would go into groups, so we kind of had a family group that we would go with. One of my best friend's sisters always fell down. Always. And then, we would all trade group candies into, because I like the sour candies and the chewy candies. My sister liked the chocolate candies, and so we would barter, and I probably took a little bit of advantage of her because she was younger, but
that's
what worked out for me. So.
That's what an older sibling does.
Yeah.
Yes. As a parent, I watch out for my daughter, who's a younger sibling. He says, wait a second, you're getting taken here. Yeah. And you talk about the group of friends. My daughter has her group of friends. My son has his group of friends. They don't necessarily want to cross.
Yeah.
And last year they both ended up on our house. We had to send one in the living room, again, all this candy trading, and one in the kitchen. We've even done it before where the house is the midway point pit stop, empty the bag because it's getting full. You got to go again, and then you have to keep track of all the piles. So it's busy. It's busy. All right. I do want to touch on this. A couple of Halloween pranks. I'm not encouraging any of this. But can you imagine the law enforcement if you've had to respond to some of these? A guy in Michigan went to a Halloween party and dressed as a robber, mask, had a fake rubber gun type deal at the party, had a few drinks, walked home, being responsible. I'm going to get a cup of coffee on the way. Went to a Starbucks, mask, gun, everyone dropped. They hit the button to call law enforcement.
Oh no.
Can you imagine responding to that one? Thought that was pretty good. And then evidently back in the day, I grew up on a farm, so I get it a little bit, kind of, but stealing livestock was a big deal. Steal a guy's cow, tie it to the statue in downtown, and who took Roy's cow, right? And that's my wife and I were recently in the city of Anoka. They are the self-proclaimed Halloween capital of the world. That's what they self-proclaimed. And it all started because kids herded Farmer Joe's cattle onto Main Street and then left them there.
Oh gosh.
Now, this is back in the early 1900s, right? So it's not. So I don't know of law enforcement if you've had any livestock calls in Grand Forks.
The county does.
The county
Yeah,
gets quite a
cows,
few.
cows get out.
Oh, sure, cows, but not intentional. I stole a guy's cow.
Not that I've heard.
Nothing that I remember, no.
No, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, so let's talk about being police officers. Michael, you mentioned you are one of the canine officers for the city of Grand Forks.
I
Your
am, yeah.
partner in the car at home right now?
He is, yeah. He's sleeping.
He's
he didn't want to
sleeping?
get up this morning.
Didn't
so,
want to get up.
Yeah.
So you talked about wanting to be a police officer, going to the academy. What led down the path of canine?
Yeah, so as I started with the police department, I kind of got positioned in my schedule. The days that I worked fairly closely with one of the other canine handlers, and I kind of just started to kind of see what he did, and I kind of started to tag along with him a little bit and help him with training, and I'd have some conversations with him, and it just kind of sparked my interest in that. I've kind of always had an interest in dogs. I've trained a couple of hunting dogs for myself and stuff, and yeah, just the more I talked with him, the more I interacted with him and his dog, the more that my interest kind of peaked with that, and then not too long after that, a spot became available, so I applied and was selected for that.
So a question with that is, yes, you have your working dog, and your dog's name is
Cade.
Cade. Do you have other pets at home?
We do. Yep, we have a little yellow lab as well.
How does that interaction go? Because canine, they're wound up, aren't they? I mean, they're ready to work.
So the one thing that I am very fortunate with is that Cade has a very clear on-off switch, right? So when he's at work, I come out in the garage in my uniform in the morning, he's spinning circles and whining and excited to go. And then by the time we get home, I open the back door of the car, he kind of sees that he's at home in the garage, and you can kind of see it on his face that he just kind of relaxes, and he flips that switch really well. So at home, he's very relaxed. He's very chill. He's really good with my kids. He's really good with our other dog. And they spend a lot of time together when they're at home. So,
talk a little bit about the canine unit at Grand Forks PD. How many are there? Is it a rotation? Is there's always one on call? How does that work?
Yeah. So as of right now, we have 3 full-time canines at the police department. They're all dual purpose, which means they do narcotic detection, and then they do tracking and evidence recovery and all that type of stuff as well. One of them is a Belgian Malinois, and then 2 of them are German Shepherds. So I have a Shepherd. Our youngest dog is a Shepherd. Our Belgian Malinois is handled by Preston Engstrom, and they're actually getting ready. He's getting ready to retire his dog.
Okay.
So she's 10, and so when she retires, that will open up a spot, and we'll start looking for and then hopefully select another handler at that time. So we try to maintain 3 working dogs at all times.
And then the last one regarding canine, you talk about you have a dog retiring. So then there's a whole training process. You just don't, here's your dog and your shift starts. Just how long do you work with the animal before you actually start being on that squad?
Yeah, so my personal experience was I got assigned my dog. I got my dog and took him home in January of 2019. I had him for a few months, just kind of getting him used to life, and he came over from the Czech Republic, so just kind of getting him
Language barriers, all that fun stuff.
Getting him used to life and my home and family, and I had him for it was right around 5 months or so, and then after that time, for the entire summer of 2019, so 16 weeks, I was gone at training with him. So I had him for those first few months. He came with me to work and stuff, but I couldn't utilize him for anything. He just kind of rode around in the car with me and got to see what I saw. And then that training process was 16 weeks. And then after that 16 weeks, we came back home, and that's when we kind of started working and doing the everyday duties.
Okay. So, Abby, you talked about your path to law enforcement was like it. Unlike Mike, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a cop one day. Talk about just your start with the Grand Forks Police Department. Mike talked about how he's CSO, then got hired and all. How about for you? Like you said, you wanted to work in a lab, but then, all right, was it, oh, here's a job to start? Or, because beyond college, there is also that PD training aspect of it.
Yes. So in the forensic science program at UND, excuse me, there's two paths. So more of a lab tech path and more of like an investigative forensics path. And that was a path that I took. I've always been interested in investigations. One of my softball coaches growing up was a chief deputy where I grew up, and I always just found his job so fascinating. So I took that path in my career. I never went back home. I ended up staying here and wanted to find a way to use my degree, and a position opened up with the Grand Forks Police Department, and my intent was to be a police officer for a few years and then try to get up to the detective bureau. But after 9 years of being here, I realized there's a lot of investigation that we do on the street daily, and that is still my goal. But yeah, just the unconventional path to get there.
So I talked with you guys out in the hallway prior, and I know this may be a difficult one to answer, but I'm going to ask it. I'm going to start with you, Abby. So you're out on a call. Have you had? I'm going to use the term weird, and am I even going to say funny? I don't want to get into the serious stuff because you guys deal with enough serious stuff the way it is. But have you had a call sometime where you showed up and you're like, "Huh, didn't expect that one today"?
Yeah, so I was dispatched to one of our apartment buildings. This was years ago now, but for a homemade weapon. Someone had found a homemade weapon, and I was, really interested to see what I was going to find. And when I got there, the caller had provided me with two really big knives, but they were like soldered together, so they kind of looked like a big X. And I was like, I wonder what the intent was behind this, but I'm so glad they found it, 'cause there's lots of kids around. So I just thought that was kind of odd. On call for service. So it went into evidence and was set to be destroyed. There is no owner of it. I think it was just...
So no answer to that?
No, I have no idea.
Practicing soldering, maybe.
It was, really interesting. Just two knives and an X, and, in an area where there's lots of kids, so at least it was out of their reach, but...
Exactly.
I always wonder what the story was behind that, or the intent. But
that's the tough part, right? You find it, it gets handed in, and then there it ends.
Lots of times we don't get any answers to some of the questions that we have.
You read it in the news like the rest of us. Oh, that's how that panned out.
Oh, interesting.
So, Mike, a question for you. How many times, because I've heard this has happened, how many times where you get a call will come to 911, you guys get dispatched, but then you arrive there and you're like, oh, this is nothing of what this radio call said?
So that's fairly frequent. That happens all the time, and that was actually going to be one that I talked about if you also asked me what the weirdest call I've been to is.
So what was it?
Yeah, so this was a couple of years ago. It was actually on the Super Bowl Sunday. So I got a call to a apartment complex. The call came from somebody, and they said that above them they could hear what sounded like a very violent fight. Like they could hear things getting thrown around, crashing, people yelling. So we go there, and two more of us came. So there was three of us total.
You're thinking you're breaking up a brawl.
From the onset, we figured there was going to be something crazy going on. Information that we had prior was that they just knew it was like a younger couple that lived there, but they didn't know them, anything like that. So we go there, we walk up in the hallway, and standing outside the door, I was ready to force my way in. Like I was ready to kick the door open because what I heard going on the other side sounded so significant that I was ready to force my way in. We knocked on the door, and they answered, and they both kind of had a little bit of a sheepish look on their face.
Oh no.
I pulled the guy out in the hallway, and I said, look, man, we got a call from somebody in the apartment building. We just want to make sure everybody's okay. And so neither one of them, they were just in their robes.
Oh,
we'll just say that.
Okay.
And he just kind of looked real sheepish and said, "I apologize. We'll try to keep it down."
Oh man.
So I said, "Have a good day."
Have a good day. Oh, holy cow. Yep, that's different than the domestic you thought you
Yeah.
were getting into.
Yeah.
Oh my. The Halloween with it around the corner. You guys don't always work Halloween, correct? I mean, you guys are home sometimes,
Sometimes we're
Right.
home. Yep.
right? What's the most trick or treaters you've ever had? Do you? I should say that. Do you track it? We track it at our house. I talk to other people. Do you have a ballpark?
We didn't track it last year, so we just recently moved, and we got, I don't know, 20 plus trick or treaters last year. I thought that was pretty decent.
Yep.
We were actually home for, well, no, we worked, but we got home in the evening. So
Yep. We've at my house, we moved a decade ago. At our previous house, we're close to 100 every year. This new house, the fewer kids in the neighbor. We got excited last year because of 50. How about you, Mike? Do you have a number?
Yeah, so we've never tracked. We've never really tracked it. I know that usually if I work during the day, I get home at 5:30-ish if I get off on time, and I'm just trying to get my uniform off and the doorbell is ringing and kids are knocking, and so it's usually a pretty steady stream, but we've never really tracked how many.
So I had Councilmember Lunsky on last week, and she lives in that Phoenix Elementary neighborhood, which I'm sure as police officers, if you're working, that's where you hang out, right? Because there's just a sheer number of kids. 1,000 kids. In my head, I don't even, logistically, I don't think I have time for 1,000 kids to come to my house.
Yeah.
Or let alone being able to count it.
might as well just leave your door open.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
and again, and then the police, right? Don't come in.
Yeah.
Right. Don't come in. But so, do you guys, when you're on patrol, is that a fun patrol night? Again, I could see early on, like you got a bunch of little kids, right, and all that stuff. Do you guys hand out candy when you're on patrol?
Yeah, so when we used to work afternoon shift, a lot of times we would individually, on our own, go out and buy bags of candy
Sure.
and pass them out. The department has been really good the last few years about purchasing that candy for us. And even the last few days on day shift, there's been some events in town that we will go to
Oh,
and
sure.
show a
Trunk or
presence.
treat type things.
Yep,
Yeah.
and pass out candies and police stickers and show a presence. And that's really fun. On afternoon shift, we used to stand over at the Halloween house, so on 18th Avenue and Cherry Street.
Yep. It's also the Christmas house too.
yes.
they do it up.
Yep.
So that's really fun. It's a really active spot for trick-or-treaters and motorist traffic, so it's also really good to be out there to show a presence too. That way, but the kids love it. Sometimes I'm like, "Are you real? Are you a real police officer? Is that a costume?"
Best costume in the world. You
Yeah.
did the car and everything.
The realest costume you'll see.
That's good. And then, Michael, when it comes to just from your standpoint, being out there, the community relations side of it, I can't imagine how many times do you have people come up? Can I pet your dog?
I mean, it's daily,
Right.
and sometimes I'm thankful for his on-off switch. I'm thankful that he's switched on at work, but
Sure, but you can't have a kid
but I
come
but
up.
I can't let kids pet him, and sometimes I wish I could, because the kids will ask, they'll get all excited. Can I pet your dog? Can I meet your dog? And my response has to be, I'm sorry, buddy. He's not super friendly when he's at work, and then you can just kind of see the disappointment. And sometimes
Right.
I'm like, dang,
That's
like,
right.
I wish I could let him.
You do have cards though.
We do, yeah. So
Oh yeah,
whenever
I've seen those.
Yep. So we get those. They're like trading cards,
like baseball
style
cards.
like
Yeah.
baseball cards. And so I always have a stack of those in my car. So I make sure and hand them out when I
That's
can.
good. That's good. Well, Abby, Mike, thank you so very much for being on the show, talking a little bit about Halloween safety, talking about, frankly, what some day-to-day of being a police officer. I very much appreciate it. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. Abby, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
And then, and thanks for being good at softball and landing your way this way. That's nice. Landing on our police force. And Mike, thanks for being one of our canine units and all that extra training that had to go into there. Appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys. So thank you to our guests. And if you want to catch this episode or any other previous episode of the City Chatter podcast, go to grandforksgov.com/podcast. We'll catch you next time.